Hey, what's up, loves? This is Purple Pill Perspectives, and I have, I was sitting here trying to figure out, like, how should I start this channel? Should I just, like, dive right into it? Should I tiptoe into it? Should I, try to be politically correct? Or should I just be like, Shazam? Boom, I'm right here.
So
Anyway,
today's topic, I want to talk about toxicity. Female toxicity. Anyways, I digress. So today I want to talk about how just the double standard when it comes to toxicity. I want to talk about what does it look like in a relationship. Also, what does it look like in a relationship being the woman that's toxic, and also responding to a world that glorifies toxicity but yet tells you that that's not healthy for you, you should leave, blase, blase, blase. So where the whole concept of this channel, right, is bringing a perspective, a balanced perspective in a Western world. And the one thing about living on the Western side of the world is there is a lot of freedom, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of opinions, not so many traditions. And when you're trying to find your way in love, when you're trying to find your way around just where does that fit in for me? How do I respond to this world? How do I take in this world? Well, a lot of that comes in the most important part of human nature, which is dating, which is procreating, which is pairing up, right? So let's talk about it. I was toxic. I said it. I'm not proud of it, but I said it because that is the number one step to acknowledging that there's a problem. We all know part of, dealing with the problem is acknowledging the problem. Well, it took me a long time to realize I was toxic because a lot of the things that I did in relationships was normalized. And that's something that we don't always talk about. As I said, if you've seen any other videos where I may have been working on a channel with someone and things like that, I say all the time that when it comes down to responsibility, you are responsible for yourself. You are responsible for the energy that you bring into this room, right? You are responsible for, just how, doesn't matter what the other person did, you still have to answer and hold yourself accountable to your part in it. So with that, why is it that we justify toxicity when it comes from a person that is, oh, well, this person did this to me and that's why I'm toxic to them? Why do we do that? Or, well, oh, he did this, so I'm going to make sure I do this. You know what I'm talking about. So let's move forward. I was toxic. What do I define as my level of toxic? I was toxic in the sense that when it came down to relationships, because I didn't necessarily understand and I didn't always have a male in my life growing up in foster care and in different homes, I didn't always have a male in the home to kind of give me that interaction when it came to operating with, someone of the opposite sex. It was hard when I found myself in a relationship and I found myself trying to learn how to communicate within that. So where that comes out is I came off way too aggressive. And I didn't realize this because, of course, I dress feminine. I feel like I carry myself well. And there was times where I knew I was toxic, but the behavior was so accepted that I didn't feel a need to change it immediately. And there's other times where, unfortunately, I really genuinely felt like I didn't know any better. Because once I started learning that that is not the norm, that there are healthier ways to deal with things, I began to change. And a lot of that came from me watching Red Pill. Just understanding the perspective of what men in the manosphere have in a sense of their argument, their perspective when it comes to dealing with women. And I always say it's like being a fly on the wall in the middle of men just gathering around amongst men, no other women, and they say how they truly feel. See, there's so many times that we look at men and we look at men in a way where they're here to, provide and protect and do all these things, and it is expected for men to be polite to women and carry themselves a certain way and think of the woman in the situation. But it's very few times that it's a healthy space for men to actually say how they really feel when it comes to when women do this or women do that, in a way that women will be open to hear and able to accept the criticism and actually learn and change and make healthier decisions from there. So with that, let's talk about it. I was very masculine, and it had a lot to do with how I grew up. A little bit about my background. I grew up in foster care, and because I was in foster care, I bounced around from different homes. There was homes that were very loving, and I was blessed, and I did have a male figure in the house, and there was some that didn't. So with that, there's certain parts of my life where I did have male guidance, and other things I kind of just had to learn along the way. And when you're surrounded by women, when you're surrounded by the older women in your family, your friends at school, or you're just friends in adulthood, sometimes it's just women gathering amongst women saying what men need and what a real man is, but yet there's no man in sight. So it's kind of just our opinion. It's kind of just what we feel. It's what society has taught us, but it's one of those things that to learn, sometimes you have to learn from men. So because of that, I grew up in an environment that it was very much inner city, urban city, and because of that, I had to develop this sense of guarding and armor around me. When you grow up in a neighborhood where if you're out walking and things like that, you have to care about your safety a lot more, and then 10 times more if you're a woman, it kind of puts you in this very fight or flight energy. It puts you in this state where it's survival, and it puts you in a way where you're outside of your feminine in a way, because you are now the provider and the protector. And when you're in a place where femininity is not always congratulated, whether it's from men, it can make you seem as if you're weaker to display levels of femininity. Maybe an easy target for any predators around, or maybe you are in a place where because femininity is not common, it's considered a threat, because now obviously men are attracted to femininity, yet if you show yourself to be feminine, it causes problems amongst you and the other women that you're around, because it is one of those, it reminds me of a crab in a barrel situation where you're in this state where it's just like, I have to protect myself, so I have to show some form of strength, some form of like some form of solidness. At the same time, I have to learn how to be soft, and I have to learn how to be feminine, but don't come off too soft or too feminine, because I don't want to be taken as I'm weak and I can be used or gotten over on or preyed upon. And I don't want to do it in such a way where it seems like I think I'm better than everybody, or, it's just like I'm pretending to be something I'm not. There's a lot of pressures based on the environment that you grew up in, and being the fact that you grew up in a city that has more violence, more poverty, and things like that, you're prone to have a lot more precautions that you have to take. So with that, you're always, as a woman, I found myself always with my head on a swivel, always watching my surroundings, things like that. And if a guy, say, did try to approach me while I was maybe walking to the grocery store or something like that, instead of thinking, hey, this is a nice, attractive young gentleman, I have to think, is this a threat? I am walking by myself. This guy pulled up to me. I'm not in a very good area and things like that. So immediately, instead of greeting the person with feminine energy, I more get like, okay, who are you? What do you want? Things like that. And it's just like, just trying to fill out if I can relax myself or not. There is very much crabs in a barrel in the feminine community. So when you deal with that, the whole aspect of we should be rooting for each other, but because there's such competition and there's not that many high value men in these areas, what happens is the women that that you grew up with sometimes will end up finding themselves in competition with you. Or if you feel like you have an advantage, if they feel like you have an advantage, maybe it be pretty privilege, maybe it be talent, maybe it be something like that. Instead of it being celebrated, it's considered a threat. So it's like, how do I display my femininity without upsetting the other women around me and without appearing weak? Everything is about survival, how you make people feel where you are and things like that. And it may not be like this everywhere, but I can say definitely in the inner cities of Los Angeles, South LA, if you're, from Compton, Inglewood, places like that, just certain areas, it's just like you have to find that sweet spot. So when it came to relationships, because I don't want to be taken advantage of and things like that, I found myself very demanding in a relationship. A lot of people think just because you live in the inner city that your value is less. So when it comes down to that, it's like you kind of have to put your foot down when it comes to your value, right? So I found myself in the situation where it's just like, just to be treated in a way that would be necessary for someone you're finding interested in. Hey, let me take you out to dinner, let me do this. If you're dating within the area that you live in, and these are inner cities, that may not always be an option, whether depending on the economy, depending on the individual and their finances and things like that. But however, it's one of those things where it's just like, it's, I would say what I don't hear enough people saying, it is definitely a luxury to be able just to date normally and go out and be in your feminine and the other individual be in their masculine and things like that. So when it comes down to that, it's just like in a relationship, I find myself having to put my foot down to reinforce my value. Hey, you can't treat me like you treat everyone else. I still demand respect. I still know my value. I still know my worth. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know any better. So I'm thinking that I am creating more value, but I noticed that I was being more confrontational, more aggressive, more, I wouldn't say intimidating, but just overly assertive when if I did have that father figure in my life at the time to specifically tell me that you don't have to keep self proclaiming your value is going to just ooze from who you are, right? I didn't always know that. So I found myself from the beginning, I need it this way, I need it that way, and I'm not accepting any less, and I deserve to blah, blah, blah. Well, I wouldn't say that it came from a sense of entitlement. I wasn't asking for like Gucci purses or to be taken to the highest steakhouse or whatever. But when it came down to just loyalty, respect, things like that, but understand that when I come at it from that viewpoint and that energy and that attitude, it comes off the opposite of feminine. It comes off as masculine, assertive, guiding, and things like that. And the man is usually the one that's supposed to come in the relationship and make that decision and make that move. Now, as a woman, if you are a woman watching this channel, your job is to be able to make sure that when you look at this man and evaluate this man, you are also responsible for who you choose. So you have the right to decline or go and move further with someone if they do line up to the values and everything that you're working towards in life and it seems like it makes sense for you. So when you have that, or I feel like I've been disrespected and things like that, because I didn't always have that father figure by my side, I am not going to say I don't, because I have some amazing men in my life, but because I didn't always have that father figure, when I felt like I was being greeted with a form of disrespect or anything like that, I found myself overly assertive because I felt like I had to protect myself. And a lot of people don't talk about that when they speak of this modern woman era and they speak of, you know, this over aggressiveness, this sense of I gotta go get things by all means necessary, stuff like that. Because for some people, that's not an option. That's not acting masculine. That's they're in a state or they live in an economy where they do have to survive. They do have to provide for themselves because they don't have the luxury of being able to go and just, oh, you know, stay at my father's house until someone asks for my hand in marriage. That's not always a luxury that's available to everybody. And there are some people that are pushed out in the world and told, you know what, now you have to get a job, you have to figure it out. And it's scary, and some of those people are women. So it's like it does put us in a place where we're protecting ourselves and we're having to provide for ourselves. So to be able to just immediately code switch once we get in a relationship and this person is not yet at the point where this person is taking care of you and you're fully there, you can find yourself in an overly independent mindset of, I don't need you, I can do it all by myself, in a way where a man doesn't feel needed mindset, because that is your set mindset for how you have to be to get by. So that was my dilemma. It's like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can soften my tone. I could state my standards, and if it doesn't amount to there, instead of sticking around and arguing my value, I could just decide to move on and say, you know what, this is not for me, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. But lastly, it's when I am in a relationship, I have to know how to cut off that career woman. I have to know how to cut off that I'm independent this and be able to be a part of a team and a partnership. And that is something that, because I didn't always have that, whether just for me, just providing for myself, or I didn't always see that growing up, where that mother and father dynamic all the time closely, where I'm able to see how they, you know, may have problems with finances, or see when they have a disagreement, or just see, you know, when just things happen in a relationship. Because I didn't witness that before my eyes, I had to kind of make my own assessment on what that meant to me. And it took me a while to get it correct and get a clear understanding of what my role was and why I was making it so difficult for myself. So you have that as well. When you don't, I wouldn't say that someone doesn't value themselves, but I will say the second reason why I was so toxic is because I felt like in my mind I valued myself. I know who I am. I know what I want. I'm not going to be out here with just any and everybody. I'm going to stay focused. I know how to be loyal in a relationship. But part of not knowing your worth, once again, arguing your worth, I'm better than this, I'm this and that, is I had to learn when to walk away as well, like I said. And when you don't know that, you will allow yourself to go through so many things. And although you know you deserve better, which is leaving you to stay in that relationship and argue, you could just go out and find better, minus the stress. So with that, because I had a sense of attachment And we have to be honest when it comes to mental health, childhood trauma, and environment when it comes to relationship. Well, for me, because I didn't have a lot of consistent people in my life, I found myself holding on to people that I fell in love with potential with, or I may have romanticized the situation and said, oh, well, you know what, I don't want to leave this person behind, yada, yada. Well, because of that, I allowed myself to deal with a lot of toxic people. And not just putting the blame on the toxic people, but what happens when you're in a toxic situation and you do not choose to remove yourself from there, you thus become toxic too. So now you're finding yourself engaging in behavior and things that you know that you're better than, you know that you won't normally do, but you don't see why you can't leave this person alone. You don't see what is stopping you from walking away from that person. So if you're someone like that, I would highly suggest maybe reevaluate. Hey, do I have any childhood trauma or just anything with dealing with people walking away, whether it's abandonment or rejection? You have to address that because that is reflecting in your relationships and it's reflecting your self-value. So in return, when I played out those scenarios and I lived through those scenarios, even though I respected myself because I didn't know how to let go of the person saw that, you know what, it's one of those, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. So it's one of those things where it's just all like, well, she hasn't left yet. She's always going to be here. She's so loyal to me. She's so this, she's so that. And I had to understand that. So when I came from that, and I came from that sense of aggressive, assertive, and things like that, I began to evaluate that and realize, as I always say, if there is an issue between you and I say, hey, maybe you should work on this, you could say that it might be me and just my opinion. But if you have multiple people or multiple situations where they turn out the same, you are the common denominator. So that you are the problem that needs to be fixed. You are this, you need to come up with a solution on why you keep getting the same results and try something new maybe. And I found that in my relationships, although I was faithful, although I was very loyal, very supportive, things like that, they all kind of went to this same place where it's just like, you know what, it seems like it's taken off, but there's so much things that's happened that has caused problems, and there's so many things that I allowed to happen that I didn't walk away. And unfortunately, you can know your value, but if you don't walk away, the other person doesn't know your value. So on the outside, it looks like you can be walked over and things like that. So things that do happen to get worse. So with that, it's like when you're going through all of that and you evaluate the situation and say, well, this is where things get messed up. I keep ending in this 2-3 year relationship, and it's like, it's so close to marriage, but it's like a lot of discord. And when you sit there and say, well, you know what, this person's saying that they don't like how I approach things, maybe I'm a little too assertive, and I'm saying on their end, it's just like, well, you keep doing this, that, and that. It's like, we have to understand that time is short, life is abundant, and if you're in a situation or a relationship where it is not going to where you want it to go, you are free to walk away. And you're free, it's okay to want different for yourself and still be, cool with the other person. It's just like, you know what, you're a great person, but maybe not for me. And I found myself where it's like I had this driven mindset, and I found myself where I fell in love with the potential of what I saw them to be. If I met them and I'm like, wow, the way they articulate their words, the way they present themselves is so professional, so this, oh, they're in college, or oh, they're doing this, I can see them being this. But what would happen is they would sometimes deeply fall off of that, and instead of accepting the situation for what it was in front of me, I kept glamorizing the picture that I saw them to be in my head. Like, they can be such a great person. And it's not to say that they're a horrible human being, but it's also to say that, hey, if you're falling in love with maybe the entrepreneur type, and you're falling in love with them and you're just supporting them, you see how amazing this person can be. And when they show you that maybe they're getting slacked on looking for work, slacked on working on their business and things like that, you have to be able to recognize that and walk away and say, you know what, well, this doesn't seem to go down a path, because the longer you stay in that relationship, and that goes for financially, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, the longer you stay in that relationship, the more it drains you, the more it ages you. And I found myself after breakups fighting very hard not to become bitter and hardened by my last relationship, where I bring that into my next. So moving on from there, it's like you have this sense of not wanting to be the fault. It's like when someone breaks up and maybe your friends are saying, oh my God, I thought you were going to be together for whatever, what happened? When you see that and you're sitting there, you don't want to say, you know what, I messed it up. You know what, I didn't know how to chill. I was a little too this or too that, or you know what, some people want to blame the other person for wasting your time, but it's like you had the ability to walk away. You had the ability to leave, but you didn't want to leave. And it's not to say you didn't, in that sense, it's not that you didn't know any better, but in this sense, it's like you didn't want to because you were afraid of being alone. You're afraid of the rejection. You were afraid of another failed relationship, blah, 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 blah. So it's like when you have these things, at what point are you going to sit yourself down and say, okay, yeah, me and this person didn't work out, but do I see any similarities in this relationship that I seen in my last? Do I see any forms of improvement? What am I doing to make myself better in the next relationship? Make myself more eligible, make myself more, working with a team rather than I can do this by myself. I don't need nobody, yada, yada, right? So when you look at that and it's just like you take a hard look at yourself and you begin to see where you're toxic, don't run from it. Don't ignore it. Don't toss it out on the other person and say, well, it's because they did this. You're responsible for your own actions. Even if you never talk to that person again, what accountability do you need to make in your relationship? And ladies, if you are like me, because I don't see a lot of channels talking about this, okay? So if you are like me that grew up in the inner city and you have a hard time tapping into your feminine energy, feel free to learn from someone else. Feel free to research it. Feel free to find other sisters in the area. Feel free, I learn from, other people on YouTube, just like I look at podcasts and things, to learn other things. So it's just like you have to make that decision for yourself. I'm going to say one thing, whether you had a father in your life, whether you had a mother in your life, whatever the situation was, well, the reason I'm like this is because of this, or because when I was little this happened. I'm going to tell you a harsh truth. No one cares. At the end of the day, you're still responsible for how you present yourself as an adult. And I am not perfect. I haven't always had it together. I haven't always known the right thing to do. But just because you're on that path doesn't mean you have to stay on that path. And secondly, you have to make an effort for yourself. You have to make a desire for yourself to improve. Okay, maybe I didn't always have, my father there to teach me these things, but at what point am I going to teach myself? I'm going to go seek that knowledge, or am I going to keep allowing myself to be in situations with men and I'm in a relationship with them and I'm saying, oh, you know what, they were the bad person. Maybe they were never the bad person. Maybe, you just didn't show up the way you thought you did in a relationship, and maybe what they value is not what you value, and maybe, you're not always correct on how to go about things, how to communicate, how to, handle a situation. So it just takes that sense of rawness with yourself. It takes that hard look without succumbing to the urge of sugarcoating just to make yourself feel better. And when you take that and you really evaluate it, I promise you, when you move to any other relationship, including friendship, including family, you're going to see a big transformation when it comes to the outcome. Even if they're not always correct, even if maybe they're not the person for you, you're going to handle it better and feel better about how you carry yourself. So some of the things I did to allow myself to be more feminine and things like that, if I'm able to provide for myself as a woman, right? If I'm able to provide for myself and I'm able to have the things that I need, but it's not all the things that I want. Me dealing with growing up and having to provide for myself so long and live alone and make sure I eat, make sure I have shelter, make sure my bills are paid. I'm no longer in the business where I am overworking myself, working myself like as a mule. Because what I notice is after I take all these jobs and after I struggle to survive when I could just relax a little, I'm actually okay with one job if I know how to stretch it out, or not that much work. Then I find that I have more happiness, more openness to a relationship. And I'm going to break that down in another video when it comes to overworking yourself in your career and what that does to your feminine aspect when it comes to being in a relationship. Secondly, I had to learn that, one, accept myself, So with that, it's just yes, I grew up in certain areas. I'm not necessarily what you think when you think of always a feminine woman, I have tattoos, I may have a piercing and things like that, but I need to ask myself, what does femininity look like for you? How can you present yourself in a better light? How can you soften yourself where you're open to love, you're open to this? Because what happens is, ladies, a good man will come in your life, but if you do not know how to recognize him, if you do not know what a good man is, if you don't even know how to respond to a good man, it's going to slip right through your fingers. And with these things, it's just learning all this, I had to learn, to go back to my roots. I came from a very spiritual, background. So it's I got back in tune with my feminine, which is intuition, which is, that nurturing, that motherly aspect. But it's always, usually side by side with spirituality, because you go deeper, into that intuition and divine wisdom and stuff that the feminine energy brings. So it's like when you ground yourself spiritually, you will start to open up. You'll start to soften. Just the fact that, I can trust God to provide for my needs and provide for my wants, instead of saying I got to go out and get it by all means necessarily. Super, I guess, Machiavellian is that's not the energy that I was designed to be in. So with that, it's like I had to ask myself, at what point are you going to live or exist? Because what you've been doing until this point is surviving. And when you're in surviving, you're in fight or flight, and none of that sounds feminine. So it's just like with this, I'm learning my way around things. I'm learning how to handle things better. I'm learning to relax. I'm learning to accept help. I'm learning to not be so aggressive, because it's truly unnecessary. And I noticed, even looking back on my old self, and then no judgment, but other people around me, especially women, when they come off rough and vulgar all the time, it's like, oh, such a pity. You're so beautiful. You don't need to do all that. You don't need to have that aggressive. There's still ways to communicate what you desire, your boundaries, what you want for yourself, your standards, your morals, without having to come off in that manner. And if you are having to come off in that manner, maybe you should change the person that you're communicating with, that you can't communicate in another way outside of that with them. So it's like it's accountability, it's the desire for change. It's me telling myself it's okay if I'm feminine. It's me also telling myself it doesn't matter if, my femininity may threaten another woman. When I look at that situation, I just look at, well, you know what? If it does cause, a commotion or drama or things like that from someone that maybe feels like you're a bit more feminine, and you're having conflict within the women's circle, and unfortunately that is a real thing that we do need to talk about, and definitely another video. But if you find yourself like that, you have to understand the level of where they are. Not necessarily cast too much judgment, but understand, they're at a certain point in their life where they're not ready to be there yet, and that's okay. But that doesn't stop me from moving forward on my journey. And you must want better and different for yourself. When you want better and different for yourself, you're not going to care about what other people think. You're going to live in your truth. You're going to be yourself boldly. So this is very much a free flow video, you guys. It's not like necessarily to the T bullet points. I will have videos like that. I really just want to introduce you guys to my energy. And what better way, if I'm going to be talking about things, and when it comes to relationship, if I am going to be talking about feminism versus femininity and masculinity and things like that, I want to start off this channel by saying I am in no ways perfect. Get that out of your head. I am not one of those femininity channels that is just like, hi ladies, do this and do that. I can be that, but that's not me. So I have to be myself. This is who I am. I'm one of those people, let's talk about it. Let's be transparent. The more transparent you are, the more progress you make, because you're not spending time trying to backtrack and see what the problem is. You're not denying the problem. You're not projecting the problem. You're fighting the problem. So with that, if what I went through or things that I've learned along the way and wisdoms that I came across can help someone else, I'm more than free to share it. This is a channel where it's a safe space, where if you are in that middle, uncomfortable, transitionary area where you're still, whether you're a little toxic and trying to get better, where you're a little masculine and trying to get more feminine as a woman, and embrace that part of yourself, and you're in the in-between where you're just getting your life together, sis, I got you. And fellas, this is also a safe space. I welcome you guys to this channel, because if you're watching this, you're going to get a deeper perspective from a woman's point of view when it comes to the modern world. You are going to get an uncut perspective where it's the truth. It's raw. It's real. It's not just saying something to sound good and presentable on YouTube, and thus leading people further astray because you're not being real with people and saying, hey, I'm not perfect. It's like so many people want this standard of perfect. So many people want this standard of togetherness and collectiveness in a way that it's like they will sit there and pacify each other and sugarcoat each other. And there's this whole facade and layer, and the representative, if you will, when it comes to meeting another person, your representatives are meeting, not your true self. When it comes down to that, how are we going to make any progress in the community? If there is this ultimate line of division where it's just like, oh, you're a modern and Western woman versus this is a feminine and traditional woman, but what happens if you're in between? What happens if you're still finding your way? What happens if, you're trying to do better and maybe you weren't given the opportunities? That's okay. I much rather someone try to change. I much rather someone look for advancement and improvement rather than to just accept, well, hey, I'm not that, or, I can never be that, or, it's not made for girls like me, or, things like that. It's just like, so you would rather be stagnant? You would rather stay put? You would rather stay in one place? You would rather just accept this fate in this down degrading area that, people think of you or you think of yourself? It's like, you're not dead yet. You have a whole life ahead of you. So if you have a whole life ahead of you, feel free to rebrand. Feel free to remarket yourself. Feel free to just trash the whole project that you were doing before and say, you know what, this is a new product. This is the new improved. This is Purple Pill Perspectives 2.0. This is who I am now. I always say, if you're not changing, you're dead. Everything that has life goes through some form of metamorphosis, some form of transition, some form of rise and shine, eat, not eat. You're going to see proof in existence, and you're going to see just proof of growth, proof that you're alive, even at the slowest frequency. So with that, don't look at what others are doing. Don't look and compare yourself to others and say, well, I wish I was like that. I struggled with that. On my feminine journey, I was like, wow, I wish I came across this before I had my piercings, before I had my tattoos. I really wish I had someone to talk to me like this. It's like, I wonder if I'll ever be accepted like this, or I'll be called a chameleon because, but it's really about here. It's really about who you are here. It's really about how you present yourself. It's really about how you think about yourself. So if you're in that space, don't compare yourself to other people. You're wasting your time. You need to be out there growing, glowing, transforming. You are on your own time, but take yourself seriously. Take yourself seriously. You have to want it for yourself. So if you're out there and you know you're toxic and you know that this is not right, you know that, things should be different, feel free to hit everybody with a plot twist, including yourself. Change it around. Create a new environment. So with that, this is the first video of Purple Pill Perspectives. I'm happy to vibe with you guys. I'm more than happy to take topics from you guys. I do occasionally do podcasts. I don't always have the time for it, but if you reach out to me or have already reached out to me, try to reach out to me one last time and I'll make sure I'll answer. Until I see you guys again.